האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Lech Lecha. We are looking at Os Tes Vav, section number 15. Before we take a look at the words of the Zera Shimshon himself, we're going to read a pasuk from Tehillim. This is Perek Yud pasuk Beis, and you'll see that the Zera Shimshon is going to open with a discussion of this pasuk. So the pasuk reads as follows: Bega'avas Rosha, with the arrogance of the wicked, Yidlak Oni, a poor man is burned. Yitafsu bimizimos zu chashavu, they are grabbed with the plans that they thought or that they contrived. Again, here's the pasuk again. Begavas Rosha Yidlak Oni, with the pride or the arrogance of a wicked person, a poor man is burned. Yitofsu b'mizimos zu chashavu, they are caught in the plans that they thought or that they contrived, that they came up with. Okay, let's keep that pasuk in the back of your mind because we're going to get right into it right now. Zera Shimshon Os Tes Vav. Midrash Yalkut. This is a quote from the Midrash Yalkut Shimoni. Begavas Rosha Yidlak Oni. There's the first half of our pasuk from Tehillim. With the arrogance of a wicked man, a poor man is burned. Ze Lot. These words refer to Lot. Shenitpas bishvil anshe Sodom, who was grabbed because of the people of Sodom. As we know, Lot made a choice to separate from Avraham, and he chose to live in Sodom, in the area of Sodom. And because of that, he ended up being caught. And we'll talk about what that means specifically in a little bit. Now the Medrash Yalkut Shimoni looks at the second half of the pasuk. Yitofsu b'mizimos zu chashavu, they are captured or they are caught in the plans that they contrived. Elu hashvatim, these people that are referred to in the second part of the pasuk are the shvatim, the tribes. Ad kan lashono, until here is a quote from the Yalkut Shimoni. V'hazayis ra'anan, so the Zera Shimshon brings in a commentator, a sefer called the Zayis Ra'anan. Peiresh, he explains, and this is a quote, Ze Lot shenitfas, this is Lot who was grabbed, shahamalochim shebol lihilochim im Sodom, because the kings who came to fight against Sodom and other cities, to fasuhu, they grabbed him, they captured him. Elu hashvatim, and then the Medrash Yalkut Shimoni says the second half of the pasuk is referring to the shvatim, to the 12 sons of Yaakov Avinu. Tzorech iyon, this requires analysis. Ma inyan ze lelot. What do the shvatim, which apparently is what the second half of this pasuk is referring to or alluding to, what do they have to do with Lot? If the first half of the pasuk is a reference to Lot, what is the second half, which is somehow a reference to the shvatim? How does that connect to Lot? So that's the Zayis Ranan's question, and the Zera Shimshon is going to set out now to answer that question. And we'll see as we go how all of this connects to our parsha. Venira l'saret, and it would appear that we can answer. In other words, we can answer the Zayis Ranan's question about what's the connection between the 12 sons of Yaakov Avinu and the story of Lot. De'isa b'medrash, because it states in another medrash, also Yalkut Shimoni, shahatam she'Avraham hevi atzmo b'sakana. The reason that Avraham brought himself into danger, kol kach gedola, that was so great, lirdof, o im Eliezer levado, or with Eliezer himself, o im shlosh meos ushmona aser yelidei beso, or with 318 people who had grown up in his house. We'll get back to that in a second. Neged Arba Melachim, against the famous 4 kings that are talked about in our Parsha. Shehayu Kol Kach Chazakim. They were so strong. The 4 kings, as we know, defeated the 5 kings in a great war. Why did Abraham go and attack them in order to rescue Lot? Why would he do that? Zehoyo lefi, this was because shehoyo diyokon shel Lot, because the facial features of Lot dome lidiyokon shel Avraham were similar to the facial features of Avraham. Lot looked like Avraham. Lot was Avraham's nephew, and we're learning that he looked like Avraham. He's very similar in his appearance to Avraham. V'zeh she'amar hakosu, and this is what the pasuk means when it says, "Vayishma Avram," and Avram heard, "Ki nishba achiv," that his brother had been captured. When Lot was captured by the 4 kings and all of their armies, their huge armies that came and captured the people of Sodom along with other adjoining areas, and Lot got swept up, Avram heard that his brother was captured. Dehainu achiv, which means his brother. Why would Lot be called Avram's brother when he wasn't really his brother? He was a nephew. So why does it say he was his brother? Bidiyokon shelo. In his appearance, he looked like Avram's brother. V'hoyozeh zilzulo shel Avraham. And this capturing of Lot was a humiliation, was an embarrassment to Avraham. So the Zera Shimshon is telling us that Avraham put himself in great danger, in grave danger, we might say, in order to rescue Lot, because Avraham, either with Eliezer alone or with 318 fighters from his household, went up against the armies of the 4 kings, the multitudinous armies of the 4 kings, in order to rescue Lot, which he did do successfully, along with all of the other prisoners that had been captured. Why does the Zera Shimshon refer to either Avram going either with Eliezer or either with 318 people? This is based on a well-known Rashi who says that when the Torah tells us that Avraham took 318 members of his household, it either means that he actually took 318 members of the household, which seems like a nice force, but that would be a small, tiny company of soldiers compared to the vast army of the 4 kings, or he took Eliezer because the gematria, the numerical value of the letters in Eliezer's name, equal 318. So that's why the Zera Shimshon says either Avraham went with only Eliezer, or Avram went with 318 of the members of his household. And either way, they were a puny, tiny force. And nonetheless, Avraham went and pursued after the army of the 4 kings in order to rescue Lot. Why did he do it? Because Lot resembled him, and it was a humiliation and an embarrassment to Avraham that people would see this man who looked like him, his nephew that resembled him, among the prisoners. Let's continue. Kimo hamoshel shel shnei achim ta'omim. And this is similar to the parable of the 2 brothers who are twins, Shehevi Rashi, that Rashi brings down al pasuk, on a pasuk in sefer Devarim, Ki kililas Elokim taloi. The pasuk states over there that when a person receives the skila death penalty, when a person commits a crime and receives capital punishment of skila, of stoning, that the body of the person after the death penalty is carried out should be hanged, should be hung up briefly. We never let, the pasuk also teaches us that the body should never be allowed to hang up for a long time, and certainly not overnight to the next day. Why? Ki kilalas Elokim taloi. Because it is either making light or a curse of Hashem when a human body, even of a wicked person, even of a murderer, is hung up for people to look at. Shekol haroeh, this is Rashi now continuing, anyone who sees, on top of the next column, Shekol haroeh oso, anyone who sees a Jewish man hanging, Omer will say, Hamelech toloi. It's as if the king, a reference to Hashem, is hanging. Why? Because a human being is created b'tselem Elokim, as we learned just a couple of weeks ago in Parshas Bereshis. A human being is created b'tselem Elokim, and so it's a disgrace to Hashem to have human bodies, again, even of murderers, hung up for people to stare at and to look at and possibly to mock. And so that's why we don't do it. So Rashi over there brings a parable of two brothers who are twins, have identical appearances. And Rashi says, in his parable, he says, one of the brothers becomes a prominent officer, a prominent leader in the community, and the other becomes a bandit. And ultimately, the bandit brother is captured, and he's put to death, and his body is hung up. And people look at the body and say, oh my goodness, that great prominent leader has been hanged for some crime that he must have committed. So Rashi says that's the same thing, that when people look at a human body hanging, it will be a disgrace to Hashem. Ve'af Khan, and so too over here, continuing in the Zera Shimshon, Kol haroeh es Lot shavoi. Anyone who would have seen Lot as a captive, Omer, might say, Avraham shavoi. Avraham has been captured because of Lot's strong resemblance to Avraham. They might think it's actually Avraham. V'yomru, and they might say, Shechas v'sholom eloko eino yochol lamod lo. God forbid, it seems like that Avraham's God was not able to stand up for him, meaning to protect him. So Avraham realized that Lot's capture was not only a personal problem for Lot and for Avram as his relative, but it was an issue of his own reputation as a God-fearing man and as a servant, a Navi of Hashem, because people would say, how could Avraham be captured? And that was what they might think, because Lot looks so much like Avram again. And so they might say, how could this happen? Why didn't Hashem, who Avram is always teaching about and talking about and proclaiming, why didn't Abraham's God protect him? So it would be a chilul Hashem for people to think that Avraham got captured. V'shema yaharguhu, and things might even get worse, and perhaps they would kill Lot. Ve'habrios yomru she'Avraham neherag, and people would say, the rumors would spread, that Avraham had been killed. Avraham was captured, they might mistakenly think, and Avraham was killed by his captors. Ve'av hayodim shehu Lot. And even those people who would know that it was really Lot and it was not Avraham who was captured, Yomru, they might say, Shenishpa lefi she'eno tzadik. Lot was captured because he wasn't a truly righteous man. V'she'Avram gam kein eno tzadik. And that must mean that Avraham is also not a truly righteous man. Shehare shavim heim b'diyoknam, because Lot and Avraham were so equal, were so comparable in their appearance, and they had such a strong facial resemblance. So people, when they think of something that happened to Lot, even though they know it happened to Lot, they might carry over and transfer that over to Avraham. If Lot wasn't such a tzaddik, and this is what happened to him, it must mean that his uncle Avraham also wasn't such a tzaddik. V'hoyechilul Hashem badavar, and therefore there would be a chilul Hashem if Lot remained a captive. Umishum hachi samach atzmo al hanes, and therefore Avraham relied on a miracle. Afal pi shehaya hadavar, even though this thing, chutz min hateva, was outside of the normal boundaries of natural actions, shehu yenatzach, that he, Avram, could be victorious le'arba al melachim, to the great armies possessed by the four kings. So the Zera Shimshon is teaching us something that's fascinating in its own right. And as we'll see, we'll tie in directly to his answer that he's developing to the original question about the Medrash and the Yalkut Shimoni. But to pause here for a moment, Zera Shimshon is teaching us the reasoning and rationale why Avraham put his life in danger and was somech al hanes. He did something that is not usually correct under halacha, under Jewish law, which is that he relied on a miracle to save himself. He went and he attacked the four kings in order to rescue Lot. Why would he do that? So the Zera Shimshon says, because Chilul Hashem was involved, the desecration of God's name. And when there's a possible desecration of God's name, Avram felt he had to take action and even be somech al hanes, even rely on a miracle and a supernatural act to be able to successfully attack the army of the four kings and retrieve Lot, which of course is what he did, what he was able to do. Next paragraph, ume'ata, and from now, kosher al hashvatim. This incident with Lot as a captive and Avraham risking everything to save him brings forth a question on the Shvatim, the 12 sons of Yaakov Avinu. Shehare Yosef hayoziv ikonin shelo, because Yosef had a radiance to his face that was domeh l'shel aviv, that was similar to his father. So Yosef resembled Yaakov Avinu. Yosef's facial appearance and his radiant countenance resembled the face, the shining face of Yaakov Avinu. Ulefi divreihem, and according to their words, meaning the allegations of the brothers, she Yosef chata, that Yosef had committed a sin, or possibly more than one. Im kain af habrios yomru. If so, if the brothers are spreading the word that Yosef had sinned, if so, af habrios yomru she'af Yaakov chata. Word might spread, rumors might spread amongst people that Yaakov Avinu had sinned. Again, because of the close resemblance, people might say, oh, if they hear something about Yosef, they might get confused and think it applies to the father Yaakov because they look so similar. Or even if they know it's about Yosef, they might say, if Yosef sinned, then it's likely that Yaakov Avinu also sinned. Ve'im yaharguhu, and if the brothers had killed Yosef, as was their plan at one point, yomru sheYaakov nerag. People might say, in fact, that it was Yaakov who was killed. V'nimtza shelo choshishu klal lichvod avihem. And we find now, with our new perspective, we find that the brothers were apparently not at all concerned and worried about the honor that should have been shown to their father, that they should have demonstrated to their father. Let's pause. What is Zera Shimshon telling us? He's telling us that whenever we learn one thing in the Torah about how a person's supposed to act, it gives us information about how others should act in that situation. From the fact that Avram Avinu risked his life and whoever, also the lives of whoever else went with him, in this seemingly irrational and perhaps almost suicidal attack against the vast armies of the four kings, the fact that he did that in order to, because he realized the facial resemblance between himself and his nephew Lot, and he realized that could produce a chilul Hashem, and that people might think he was captured and Hashem didn't protect him, and perhaps even if Lot got killed, they would think Avram got killed. Because of that, Avram acted with tremendous alacrity and tremendous courage and went on the attack. But now the Zera Shimshon says we have to ask about the Shvatim. How come they were not concerned about the resemblance between Yosef and Yaakov Avinu, and how come they weren't worried that if they spread words about negative words and negative reports about Yosef sinning, which they sincerely believed had happened, why weren't they concerned that people would perhaps think that that spread these rumors about Yaakov Avinu? And if they killed Yosef, how come they seemingly weren't concerned that people would think Yaakov Avinu had been killed, which would produce the exact same question in possible chilul Hashem? How could it be that Yaakov Avinu was killed? How come Hashem didn't protect him? And so in the same situation, or I should say in a similar situation to the one that Avram was confronted with when Lot was captured, the brothers seemed not to have been as cautious and as careful as Abraham was, and that's a question on their actions. Ve'alzeh, next paragraph, ve'alzeh Amar HaMedrash, and on this the Medrash says, Begavas Rasha. This is, of course, back to our pasuk in Tehillim that we started with. Begavas Rasha, with the arrogance of a wicked man, the Medrash says, Zen Nimrod. Who's the wicked man that was arrogant? It's a reference to Nimrod, the famous world leader at the time of when Avram Avinu was a boy. Shahaya ose atzmo Eloha, that he made himself into a god, into a false god. Nimrod tried to convince everyone that he was a deity and that they should worship him. Vehu, and he, Nimrod, is synonymous with Amraphel, the Amraphel who is talked about in our Parsha, who was one of the four kings. Amraphel Melech Shinar, the Torah identifies. So the Medrash says that Amraphel is actually Nimrod. And how come he's referred to as Amraphel? Well, it's a play on the words. If you look at Amraphel, you can break it up into Amar, pool, or Amar fell. She'amar, because Nimrod said LeAvraham, to Avraham, pole, fall, v'chule, etc. Meaning Nimrod said to Avraham, fall into the Kivshon Ha'esh, into the fiery furnace. Meaning he told his soldiers to push Avram into the furnace and be burned alive was Nimrod's plan. Of course, Hashem saved Avraham from that great danger. So Nimrod is Amraphel, and Nimrod was haughty and arrogant to an extreme because he made himself seem like a deity, and that is, according to the Medrash, what's being referred to in our pasuk in Tehillim when it said Gavas Rasha, the arrogance of this wicked man. That's the arrogance of Nimrod. Yidlak Oni, a poor man got burned because of his arrogance. Zelot, this is Lot, as we saw before. Shenitpas biyodo, because Lot was captured in the hand of Nimrod, in the hand of Nimrod, who is synonymous with Amraphel, as we said, Bishvil Shahaya Bistom, because he was living in Sodom. Ve'ikar zidono v'ga'avoso b'milchama zo, and the primary act of intentionality, of wickedness and arrogance that Nimrod showed in this war, it's because he wanted to praise himself, lios lo le'eved, that Lot should be his servant. Continuing, diyukno shel Avraham, because Lot resembled so closely the appearance of Avraham. So Nimrod was very, very happy to have the opportunity to capture Lot, because if he captured Lot, he knew that he would have not only a relative of Avraham's, not only a nephew of Avraham's, but he would have someone who resembled Avram closely in appearance, and he could go around and brag and take pride that he had captured a relative of Avraham's who resembled him so closely. Kedichsiv, as the pasuk says, Vayishma Avram ki nishba ochiv. Avram heard that his brother had been captured, and as the Zera Shimshon explained before, the Torah says brother here to talk about the extremely close resemblance of Lot to Avraham. V'zeh goram she'Avraham yismoch atzmo al hanes, and this caused Avraham to rely on a miracle, machmas kiddush Hashem, in order to make a sanctification of God's name rather than allow a chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name, to take place. Umitam zeh, and for this reason, yitofsvu hashvatim. This is what the second half of the pasuk means when it says they were caught. It's a reference to the Shvatim. It's a reference to the 12 sons of Yaakov Avinu. They were caught b'mezimos zu chashavu, in the plans that they had made up al Yosef, on Yosef, lahamiso, to kill him. Shehayezilzu godol bichvod avihem, because they caused a great embarrassment and almost a great disgrace to their father, Yaakov Avinu. So the Zera Shimshon has circled back, now that he's developed these different ideas and shared them with us. He now has circled back to answer the original question that the Zayas Ranan posed on the Yalkut Shimoni in the very first paragraph. What is the connection between the Shvatim that they are alluded to in the second half of the Pasuk in Tehillim to Lot, who's alluded to in the first half? Answer: it has those two subjects have everything to do with each other, because the Shvatim are being criticized for the fact that they did not seem to take into proper account the honor that they had to show to their father, because if they had, then they never would have spread rumors about Yosef, who resembled Yaakov. They never would have spread rumors about him committing sins, and they certainly never would have planned to kill him, which could have led to a terrible Chilul Hashem. Yasher Koach for joining in the learning this evening, and we look forward to learning Zera Shimshon again on next week's Parsha.